planning on going for that. So I'm taking over for Matt today. But today we're actually going to be going over QB maps, which is something that I work a lot with. But also with that, as always, we're going to start off with Q&A, as we always do. So if you have any kind of questions, you can either raise your hand in Zoom, or you could just type into the chat your question. So we'll give a little bit of time in case anybody has any questions, and then we can go over that.
Looks like everyone's ready for QB maps.
Yeah, it looks like nobody has any questions about anything else. They just want to jump right into it. So yeah, I guess I can just start off by explaining with QB maps. Pretty much, as you can tell by the name, it allows us to take the data from your Quickbase app and take that information and store it onto, or display it onto a map. And then you have a whole bunch of different things that you're actually able to do with it. You can obviously on that map display all the locations that you want to show. We have a legend. You're able to do some things like getting directions and a whole bunch of other things that we're able to do. And because there are so many things, we actually did want to do a quick poll for you guys, just to kind of see what you wanted to do, just in case we start to go over time a little bit or get close to the end. The poll should be showing up now for you within Zoom. Pretty much we just want to see if you want to show us displaying data from multiple tables at once onto the same map, or if you wanted to see our radius feature where we're able to display a pin and then show specific records that are only 5, 10, 20, however many miles away from that location. So we'll leave that poll running for a little bit, and we'll get back to it later once we get closer to that actual time. But yeah, so pretty much I am back into this this lease management application that Matt has used numerous times for multiple different office hours. As you can see here, there's still Excel docs and a couple of other add-ons in here. Now we're going to be adding QB maps to it. So when you first want to install this, what you're going to want to do is actually go to the Choose Cloud. And from here, we're going to just authorize this new application. So we'll click on this button here, and we'll get the pop-up. It'll ask us just for the user token and some other information. I believe the user token was this one. If we select the application, yes, it should be this lease management office hours app that we want to set it up in. We'll select next. And now here it's going to ask us just some questions about what we want to do with the actual data and just some necessary things that we need for setting this up. So this first one is selecting the addresses table. This is just where the actual locations are stored in your Quickbase. For this, I'm going to be using the properties/units table because this already has a bunch of addresses already filled in here. So I'll just select that from the drop down, this properties and units. Now we're going to just need a name. This is just for displaying it easily. Property title might be best for this app. And then here we're going to select the address. Pretty much just each part of it. So the first one, you'll just select the street. Then you'll select the city, the state/region, and then the postal code. Those fields are automatically created by Quickbase if you have an address field. So you, as most people are probably going to use the address field, you can just quickly select, okay, the address, and then select all of the smaller fields that get added when you create an address field. Now here, We're going to see this feature in a little bit, but this is just asking us for 3 fields that can display extra information if you're looking at a specific record on that map. So this can just be any kind of field that you really want. Just for this example, I'm going to choose number of leases. I'm going to go with, let's just go with EFP date so that we can see the time that exact forms plus ran. And
James, quick
then,
question in the chat from Carlos. Is that able to be mapped to formula fields or no?
So yes, each of these can be pointed to formula fields so that you can have a formula field displaying as well. So we allow pretty much every type. I think the only ones we don't allow are probably just file attachments, just because that would be a little difficult to display. But we can also include some things such as images. So if you have like rich text that's displaying an image, you can actually include those as well. So there's a lot of different fields that you can display. Let's find another good one. Let's go with unit type. That sounds like a good thing to display on this. Here it's asking for the dimensions of the map. This is actually for, oh, sorry, I see Carlos replied, not to display names, the actual address fields. Oh, yes, so if you mean these fields being formulas, yes, so I don't know if any of these necessarily are formula fields, but in this dropdown, we're displaying all the text ones. So the address fields, if those were formulas for however you had it set up in your app, those should display as well, as long as they are text fields. So I hope that answered your question, Carlos. So yeah, back to these map dimensions. These were actually used for the older version, so these aren't used anymore. So you don't really have to worry about these. But then when we get down here, we get to the add filter criteria. This is basically just a way for you to create a filter just to display only the records that you want. Just for this example, in this properties table, there's only 10 records, so really not too many. Something that you could potentially end up doing is saying if a status field is only incomplete and ignore the ones that are completed. You could have that so that your map is only showing the ones that still need to be completed and gives you better data to view. But yeah, just for this example, I'm going to set it up just so it's going to display all of them, which likely won't be your use case. So typically the best way for this is just to do record ID number. Oh, yep. Like Matt always says, he changed the record ID number, so that is different. We'll say is not a static value, and we'll just say 0. You'll just click then add filter, and then that gets thrown in there. So now we're able to actually finish this. And now the QB Maps wizard will now actually be setting up a new table, and it'll be adding some new fields, and it's already done. So now if I go back to the app and I hit refresh, and if I scroll over, you'll see now there's this new table called QB Maps. So let's just open that up now. So it created a new table here, and it already filled in one record for us to actually use. So right now, this view map button, it will work, but I figured it'd be best to update it a little bit and explain how it's working on the back end. So let's actually just show you what this button is currently saying. So here you have a bunch of the normal stuff. For example, you have the client ID, you have the app ID. Most of our add-ons have this. This is just stuff for us to know which client is running it, as well as which app is this running in. So some of the other fields that we have in here are the legend record ID number. which in this case is just going to be the table that this is running from. And then we also have the legend field ID, which in this case is 12, which is actually just this legend properties table, which is field ID 12. We'll explain that in a little bit. We'll explain how that works and kind of how that looks once we get there. But this part here is really just, it's the meat of QB maps, how it all runs. So the first parameter we have here is QB DBID1. And this is just the DBID of the table that we want to display the locations from. So since we're using the properties in units, that's actually just this value. So you'll notice it ends in 22VR, and this one also ends in 22VR. So you know it's the same table. Here in this query one, this is just that filter that we filled out in the setup, and that's actually just grabbing the value from here. This query here, that's actually just the format that Quickbase uses for their queries. If you have any questions on how those actually are set up, you can actually just do a quick Google search on Quickbase, typing in something like Quickbase query, and you'll find a link right there just to explain all the different things you can filter with. And then here I have the CList one. So this is basically just telling us all of the information that we need from those specific records that we find in that properties table. The CList is kind of long. There's a lot of fields here, but by default for this setup, we create this line here for you just to explain what that CList is and each of the stuff in there. So for example, this first one is the record ID number, which actually in our case, it's the property unit number. And then here we have the latitude and longitude, which in this case is 81 and 82. If you don't have those fields, you don't need to worry because we actually create those fields for you with the setup. I'll just show that stuff in a little bit. But in the case that you have your own latitude and longitude fields, you can actually swap those values out for those field IDs instead. But after that, we have the name, and that's just the value just to simply display some kind of title or name for the record, just to make it easier to know which one you're looking at. And then after that, we do have the marker. That's just telling us what kind of pin to display for that record. We'll also explain that in a little bit too. But after that, we have this address, city, state, and zip. That was just the fields that you pointed out before in the setup. And those just tell us the actual location of the record so that we know where to display the pin. And after that, we do have the URL. That's basically just going to display on a button. We create that as well with the setup. And by default, it'll just return you back to that record that you were clicking and send you straight to Quickbase for that record. And then these last three here are these U1, U2, U3. Those are just the custom fields here. These are basically just the three different fields that you can display when you click on one of those pins. So yeah, that's it with the CList. And like I said before, these three parameters are really the main part of QB maps for how it all runs. So something else that you can do is
real
that
quick, James.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. In the chat, which are used for the pin on the map, latitude and longitude, or address attributes?
So that's actually a very good question. Almost both. So by default, we'll actually use the latitude and longitude. But because most people don't have those values, we will actually use the address fields after that. Something else that our process does, though, is that we actually take the address and we'll geocode it so that we actually find out what the latitude and longitude is. So even if you have that address, once you run QB maps, it'll figure out the latitude and longitude and actually be able to fill that in. But just so you know, if you do have the latitude and longitude already filled in, since we're not using the address to plot it in that sense, we're not going to re-geocode it. So you won't have to worry about your latitude and longitude getting overwritten by chance. So yeah, I'm glad that answered your question, Wes. Oh, and you have another one. Can you use Street 2 with latitude and longitude? I'm not entirely sure, actually, because I think we do need the latitude and longitude in 2 separate fields. So I don't know if that would cause any issues. But technically, you could assign the latitude to one field and the longitude to another field, and then you wouldn't have any issues with that. And it doesn't necessarily need to be specifically the latitude and longitude, just as long as it has the correct values in there, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's at least most of that for the parameters. We'll probably discuss some more parameters once we start showing some more features, but we'll get there when we start showing that stuff. But something that I mentioned while showing that was the marker. So if we actually go back to this properties and units, well, we're actually going to take a look at some of the fields that got added. They might be put at, yeah, so they were actually put at the end. So we added 4 new fields here. Those are just the latitude and longitude fields that I mentioned before. The QB Maps marker, which we're going to discuss, as well as this QB Maps URL. So this QB Maps marker, if we take a look at this behind the scenes, we'll notice that this is actually just a formula text field. So with this, we can actually have it specify many different ways of how to actually display these pins. So for example, I know there's a status field here. Yeah, so there's unit status. So like I was mentioning before, you could have the different pins displaying for different reasons. So let's just set up this formula so that we're setting it up so that each of these different statuses will have a different marker color. So the first one we have is V for vacant. So we'll change this D to a V. And I think we'll change the color to red. But also what we're going to want to do is we'll put an if statement in here before this, and we'll say, we'll just grab this field name, if the unit status equals vacant, then we'll display VRED. But if it's not that, and we have the other values, such as moving in, then we'll display a pin with the letter M for moving in, and we'll make this one green. The next one is occupied. So we'll just decide to make that one an O, just so that we understand it at a quick glance. And then let's go with, we already used red, so you know what, O for orange. We'll go with that. And then for the last one, which is moving out, we'll actually make this one blue. We already have M for moving in. We can still use the M for this one as well, but we'll make it something else. Let's just so we can see it, let's make it Z. Why not? And this
James
one,
Keith Hendrick in the chat real fast if you want to take a look and see if you have an answer for him.
Okay, yeah, so I don't fully know what your use case could be, but I'm going to show exactly how this actually works in a little bit. Um, and actually, you know what? Oh, we were having, oh, just got to put this here. Once I get this set up, I'll display the map so that you can see exactly how it is running. And then kind of explain a little bit how this could work for you or maybe someone else as well. So if I open this in a new link here, or in a new tab, at first it's going to ask you if you want to allow us to use your location. You can change this by changing in the URL, show location to QB Maps, actually, that will get around that. But this is useful for some other features later on. So for now, I'll just allow it. And then it'll eventually just display this map. Yep. So here, this is actually the map now that's getting displayed. So the good thing about this is that now you have a visual representation of your data on an actual map so that you have different ways of actually checking to see how things are and maybe different ways that you can use your stuff. It definitely depends on what your company needs. So, for example, some clients, if they're using the multiple tables, they can display a table of employees and another table of the jobs. So that, let's just say, for example, the red V, that would be employees, and Z would be the job locations. So you might think, okay, I have somebody, I want to assign them to a job, but if they're scattered around the country or the state or really anywhere, it's good to know where those employees are so that you can easily assign them by just looking here and saying, okay, this person's in Chicago and we have a job in St. Louis and Seattle. It's going to be a lot easier for this person in Chicago to work on the job in St. Louis, and it very likely won't be ideal for them to work in the job in Seattle. So the best thing with this is being able to display your data on an actual map, and you get to see how your data how it can relate to each other, if that makes sense, by seeing how close they are, where they are, and allowing you to view it with all the data that you need. But yeah, so I guess while we have this map open, as we were just setting this up before, we were setting it up so that V would be red, so that I know, okay, this is vacant in Chicago. Let's view this and let's get somebody to work on this so that it's no longer vacant and somebody's moving in and living there. Oh, looks like there's a question from Matthew Duffy. If my employees are using tablets, can we use their location based on their current location or a static location like home address? So yes. Right now, this isn't set up to show my own location, but it is set up so that it's allowing me to use my location. So something that we can actually add into here is the show location equals true parameter. That will actually just put a red pin of my own location. But something else that you can do, because you were saying, or a static location, if that static location is stored in Quickbase, we'll be able to display it onto the map. So you could potentially even show both of them if you truly needed to. Yeah, so with this, so for example, going back to the Chicago job, this one is vacant. If you click on it, it'll zoom in right onto that pin and it'll show you some of the data. So here, this is actually just that name field that we specified before. And then you can also see here, these are the 3 of those custom fields that we had so that you get a quick look at the data that you have there. So the number of leases, okay, we can see there's one lease here, but maybe now you think, okay, maybe we could get more leases now that you're viewing this and seeing, okay, it's also vacant and you can see the location that it's at. Something that I mentioned before was with that QB Maps URL field that's on the properties table. That's actually what's controlling this click to view. So if I click on that, that'll take me straight to this, this record. So now I can see all of the information that's there, see the relationship. So now I see that one lease and everything else that you have in Quickbase. So as you can tell now, if I try to zoom out, that's probably going to take a little too long because I have locations viewing from all over the map. So what you can do just to quickly zoom all the way back out is actually just hit this clear, and that'll take you right back to as zoomed in as possible while viewing all of the pins. But also something that you can do here is on the side, we have a list of the locations that are displayed, as well as a search bar. So I could type in central, and then I'll see, okay, central islip is showing up. So if I click on this, this will show me that one, that record, and now I can kind of see all of the records that are around it. And again, you can also just hit clear and it'll zoom it all out for you. So another thing that we can actually do with this data that might work for some of your use cases is we can actually display the directions between multiple locations or two locations. So that's just being used with this directions tab. So for example, if we wanted to actually see what that employee would do if they had to drive from this Chicago location to that St. Louis location. So what you can do actually is you'll see these set as origin and set as default destination buttons here. Just clicking on this will actually fill in the location here in the get directions. And then let's see where that St. Louis one was. It was right here. Now, if I set this as the destination, that gets populated as well. And now if we do get directions, it'll actually show you the best route to take to get there between the two locations. And it gives you turn-by-turn directions as well. Even as well as if you look at the top, it gives you the total miles and about how many hours and minutes it'll take between the two locations. Can you pull that mileage amount into a Quickbase record? So we aren't able to do that. That's something we could look into potentially, but at the moment we don't have a way to store that into Quickbase. I guess as a quick way to do that is you could copy this and then go back to one of the records, and with that click to view, you'll go right to the record. You could hit edit, or you could even update that button so that it opens up an edit record, and then paste it right into that record and then hit save. But at least natively, we don't have a way to automatically put that value into Quickbase. So thank you for your question, Carlos. Yeah, so this will give you all of the directions and how long and how many miles and all of that. But as you can see here, we also have another button here that says Open Google Maps. So if you click on this, that will actually take that same directions and open it in Google Maps instead. It's actually interesting. I haven't seen this yet, but it also shows the flight way to get there. But at least it shows by default the driving distance to get there. The good thing with looking at this is that you can actually see there's a lot of traffic in Chicago right now. So maybe there's a better way. I think that will probably line up pretty close to what this is still showing. Yeah. So the native QB Maps one is showing pretty much the same exact way. But sometimes, depending on traffic, Google Maps will have that live data. So they might know, okay, it might be better to take a different route, and that might be a little bit faster. So for the two different use cases, if you're planning something in advance, it might be better to use the Quickbase maps or the QB maps to get the directions. And then if you're looking for something in the immediate, it might be better to open it up in Google Maps. So, but yeah, so once you're done looking at the directions, you can hit this clear. And again, it'll take you all the way zoomed out. And then that the directions go away. So now you can view all of the pins again. So now I'm going to, what I think we'll do now is we'll actually show you how to display the directions between multiple locations at once. So this will actually require us to update this URL. So we're just going to add a parameter in here. So just like most of them, all of the parameters are separated by that ampersand. And then this will be multi-select equals true. So I'll hit save. So now this button is going to be using that parameter instead. So now we're back to this same map. But now if you go to directions, you'll notice here there's this enable multi-select. So if you click on that, it'll tell you to start using the draw tool, which if you look towards the top of the map, you'll notice there's now these three options here. So let's go over here to Long Island, and we'll use this on these locations. So there's two different options that you can use. You can either do draw a rectangle or draw a shape. So the rectangle is just a pretty simple, just drag your mouse across the screen while holding down the left click, and you'll select all of the locations within that area. Now you'll come over here and it'll ask you to select each of the locations. So we'll just select some of these. And now if we do get directions, it's going to show you all four of those locations. And given the start and end locations, the best route between all of them. So as you can see here, it's going to start us out at 12 Apple Street. And then it's going to take us to 116 Orange Street. And then when you get to C, it will take us to 1200 Veterans Memorial Highway. And then at the end, you'll get to 3505 Veterans Memorial Highway. And just like before, you can actually open this up in Google Maps, or yes, Google Maps, and it'll show you this again. Thankfully, there's not a lot of traffic around here, but this is very useful for that. So I'll now basically do the same thing, but I'll now use the shape version. So the nice thing with this is, okay, this Z is kind of in between all of those three, but I don't really want to display that one. So you can actually, by just left clicking to put each of these corners down, you can kind of maneuver around other pins. So now, as you can see, in the black area, we only have the three, and we're excluding this Z location. And you'll see here, we're only selecting three of them. And now if we do the locations again, we'll select a different destination one. Now if we do get directions, it's ignoring that original Z one, and now it's showing it's A to B to C with the best route possible between the three. And like before, you can also open this up in Google Maps. So something else on here, which I haven't set this up yet, but here we have the show legend. Right now the legend is blank, so let's fix that. So normally, like I mentioned before with the URL parameters, we have this legends property. Since we have a couple of different pins that we're showing, we're going to make a quick change to this one. We're actually going to change this from text to text multi-line. And now if we go to hit edit, it gives us a nice big box, which gives us some extra room, and it allows us to put in new lines pretty simply. So in here, what we're actually going to do is we're going to specify the pin and the name for the pin that we want to display. So for example, we had the v-red. So we'll just do v-red. We'll put the vertical bar, and then we'll put vacant. After that, you'll just hit enter, and you'll put in the next one. Just for time's sake, I won't put all of them in, but I will put another one in. So I'll put moving out, which that one was the z-blue. You'll put another vertical bar, and then you'll put the name. So moving out. So then you'll just hit save. And now if we generate a new map, we'll see that we're now showing both of those onto this legend. And like I was kind of doing before, let's say you're viewing the map and you're thinking, okay, maybe the legend's in the way a little bit. You can just hit this checkbox here and it'll hide it right away. And if you think, okay, there was nothing that was hidden behind it, you can also then click it again and it'll show right back up. Yeah, so that's most of those, most of the features. There's still plenty more, but I'm actually going to stop that poll that we were doing before. Let's see. Yeah, so it looks like the radius feature won. So we have time to show that. So I'll get right into that. So pretty much to explain that right now, we're displaying all of these pins, but let's say we only wanted to display the pins that were just around this this orange pin. The way that we can do that is actually setting up QB maps into the table that these locations are from. So we're going to start with that. Let's just find a good one that we can use. Yeah, let's go with this one. So this is just the one that we'll use for testing, but this button will work on any of the records actually. So we're going to add a couple of new fields in here. We'll call this one just QB maps. We'll make this one a formula URL. I'll make just this one for now. If we have time, I'll start making some of the other fields. But right now, this one is blank. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to go back into the properties of the formula URL in the QB maps table, and we're just going to copy this whole thing. So we're going to paste this into here, and then we're going to make some changes. Again, we have this issue with the property name. So let's get that field name again. Yeah, property / unit number. So we don't have the query field in here, but something that you can do is actually just put the query straight into the formula URL field. So if we put that in there and then clear this out, then we don't have to worry about that. And same thing here with the C list. with the custom fields. Those were basically just in this table, just so that you can vary it based on each record. But we're going to make this a little bit simpler on the user, just so it's a simple click of the button for each of these records. So instead of having this custom field 1 here, we're actually just going to put the value straight in there. So that's 51. Um, 2 is 65. And then the last one was 7. So now we have all of this. If we save this, this will be pretty much the same button as before in the QB Maps table, except now it's in this property/unit settings. We're going to add some other things into this so that we can actually do what I was mentioning before, where we display the radius, or we display only the records that are in a certain number of miles around a certain record. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to copy these 3 parameters here and paste them right back in. And then we're going to make just a few changes to these. One, we're going to change all of these 1s here to a capital R, which tells us the radius. And then we're going to add some more parameters. So we'll put more ampersands. Dist equals y pretty much tells us that, yes, we want to use the radius feature. And then rad equals 5. That's just telling us the amount of miles that we want to use for that radius. So one thing with this, these R parameters here, is that you're going to want to make sure that this is only for one specific record. If we end up getting multiple, we will display the multiple records, but the radius feature won't work because we won't know which one to base the radius off of. But since we want it to only be a specific record, we're going to take that 7 value and we're going to put that right into the query, and we'll change the query so that instead of saying exclude the records where the value is 0, we're going to say only include the records where that value is 7. Something else that we're going to want to do with the original query is we're actually going to want to make sure that we're excluding this record that we have here, just so it doesn't show up multiple times. So what I'll do here is I'll actually just change this so that it's saying that it's not 7. A quick and simple way is actually just to copy this, put A and D, and then paste that in afterwards, and make it so that that is excluding it instead, just in case you had a more specific query that wasn't very similar to this one. And actually, you know what, just so it's a better use case, I'll actually do how you should set this up, because that 7 was making it so that it was only running for that specific record. But if we want to run this from a different record, it's best to have this actually be that value instead. I'll actually paste that in here as well. So now it's saying exclude the record that it's running on, and then this one is saying only include the record that it's running on. So we'll actually hit save now. Actually, I think just so it's a little bit easier on the eyes, we'll just set this up so that it's just saying QB Maps and not the entire link. We'll display it as a button and open it in a new window, just making it a little bit easier on the eyes. Now, if I refresh this, we might see this at the bottom. I guess it didn't get added to the form. So let's actually just go right back to that report. Maybe it got added there. It didn't get added there either. We'll just put it right below a location. Why not? Yep, just this QB Maps. So now we have this button here. So now ideally what this should do, as long as I set everything up, is that it'll now, okay, I got insufficient permissions. Might have messed something up with that URL. Let me double check that. Oh, you know what? I think it's because I didn't set up the legends field. We'll add that in just so we have it. That was field 86. So that might have been the issue because 12 might have been a different field and was either giving us an issue with that or maybe there was some permission. Okay, that was the issue. So yeah, so now, as you can see, we're actually only displaying 3 locations here. We were running it off of this orange O record, and now we're only displaying Z and V. And as you can tell, if I zoom out, you'll notice all of the other pins aren't there, and that's because it's not within the radius of 5 miles that I set it to. So if we change this to be larger so that now it's 20 miles, and we run this map again, so now we actually, I guess the 5 miles was leaving out just this M here. So now that it's a little bit larger, we're able to see that as well. With the radius, you could do a couple of things. You could either put it straight into the formula URL, so it's always that value. I've seen some clients have an actual field in their record so that they can type in the radius, just to add a little more flexibility. But let's actually go to one of the other ones that's really far out and doesn't have anything next to it. This might be a good one. This one's all the way in California. So this will be displaying the map with 20-mile radius. But as you can see, there was nothing around it. So it just zooms in right onto that one pin. So yeah, so that's pretty much the use case for the radius feature, allowing you to show all these different pins right next to a specific record. Something else that you could potentially do actually too with this is, so right now we're running it off of this orange, but potentially there's other records that have that orange as well. So what you could do is actually create a separate field for that QB Maps marker, and then you'll actually be able to display a different color specifically for that. So you could do a purple pin instead, so that you know, okay, this is the center one that I'm running it off of, and not some of the other pins. So we're getting close to the end of this. So I did want to open this up for more questions, and of course, Bob must have read my mind. So how is the mobile experience for this? The mobile experience is actually very good. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm doing this from a computer right now, so it's displaying in more of a horizontal version. But on your phone, we can actually have it in that vertical way that most people use their phones. Something else too with that is that this location list normally doesn't open up on mobile, so by default, it will actually be hidden. But this button here still shows up. So on mobile, you can click that. It's just that this location list will take up the whole screen, just so it's easier for you to view it. Also with the mobile, I didn't get to show it today, but we do have the ability to show the user's current location, like I mentioned before. But with that, we found that the mobile phones are better at finding the user's current location than a desktop computer, typically not set up to use GPS locations. But it's also good because you can have the directions on your phone, and you can also open up the Google Maps directions as well and have that on your phone in case you have a driver who opens it up and uses that to actually drive to their next location. So we have another question. This one's from Carlos. Is there a limitation to how many addresses you can store? Well, the addresses are stored in Quickbase, so that limitation isn't, it's pretty much very high, but that's more of just on the table itself. But if you're talking about limitations that are being displayed, there is a limitation. I think it's either 500 pins or 1,000 pins all at once, which is a very high number. And typically somewhere around there, the performance tends to drop a little bit. So we tend not to want clients to do that. We've also found too that when clients try to display a ton and ton of pins, they're always not trying to see all 1,000 pins. They're just trying to find a couple, and one that can kind of mess up your user experience because now they're seeing 1,000 pins when they're trying to find a handful. So you can use those filters actually to cut it down more so that you're only showing a certain number, and helps those users see only the pins that they need so that they can view the reports and do whatever they need all quick. So yeah, then we have another question. This one's from Joshua. As the latitude and longitude got mixed up, if the latitude and longitude got mixed up, is there a way to refresh those? Yes. So actually, if you clear out the latitude and longitude, we'll then use the address field again, and that will then geolocate it, and we'll then populate the latitude and longitude over again, so that now you have the correct value. Now we have a question from Matthew. Can we set up a dynamic filter in Quickbase like we have in table/reports? Yes. So you can actually, so since the query, if I show this again, so since the query is either in a field or put directly into that QBMaps URL formula field, you could potentially set something up in your app so that your users can fill in drop downs or something like that, and other values and other text fields, and have this query be more of a formula where you say, okay, if it is this drop down, put that value into there so that we use that for the comparison. So you could do that to have kind of a dynamic filter. Then we have a question from Greg. Is there any way we can use custom maps / layers in Google Maps? We need to be able to show shapes and points on a map. So we aren't able to do that if I fully understand what you're asking. So I think what you're asking is to be able to display shapes and maybe potentially images directly on the map. We don't have the ability to do that. I'm trying to think if I don't think there's any simple workaround to kind of get that to work either. But yeah, so we wouldn't be able to do that. Pretty much the only thing that we can put on the map are these pins. And something else that we didn't get to show actually is with this radius feature, we do have a way to display a circle around that center pin that the map was generated on. But that doesn't necessarily sound like that's your use case, Greg. So are there any other questions that anybody has for QB Maps and maybe any of our other add-ons? Give a little bit of time in case somebody's still typing. Oh, all right. Another question from Carlos. Are all the addresses pulling from that QB Maps table? So no, actually. This QB Maps table, this is actually it's basically a control table set up so that you can easily view the map. But the addresses are pulling from the properties table. So for example, this record here is just this 3505 Veterans Memorial Highway. And on the map, then that's getting displayed here at 3505 Veterans Memorial Highway. So yeah, those addresses are being filled or being pulled in from your other tables, if that makes sense. So, and obviously it doesn't have to be a properties or units table. You could set it up to pull from any of your other tables as long as there's an address or even a latitude and longitude field. All right. Are there any questions from anyone else? Or is that the last question of the meeting? Oh, guess not. You have to manually put in the latitude and longitude. So no, if you already have the latitude and longitude, then you can still use that, obviously. But what we do is we take the address that you specify. So in this case, that's this 3505 Veterans Memorial Highway, Ronkonkoma, New York. And we actually geolocate that so that we figure out the latitude and longitude for you. So actually, I guess just quickly before the meeting's over, I'll just display both the latitude and longitude. I'll hit save. So yeah, these two values, I had no idea what they were before this, but these got filled in once I generated that map. So you won't have to manually put in the latitude and longitude. Granted though, if you already knew the latitude and longitude, so like for example, some people, they're not necessarily using an address, they're using basically like an electric pole that's just on the side of the road that doesn't have an address. Sometimes those people will have the latitude and longitude already known, so then they'll have those already in the record. Yeah, so I guess I'll cut off questions there because we're in the last minute of this meeting. So I want to thank all of you guys for coming out. And if you have any other questions about QB Maps, you could reach out to me, or you could also reach out to support@juicetech.com. So thank you everyone for coming.